everybody. I am Stacy Clark, CEO of CircusTalk. I'm coming to you from Montreal, unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which I live. Tiohtià:ke, historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. In support of those relationships, I invite you to visit the Indigenous Performing Arts Alliance. It's IPAA.ca. It provides leadership support, representation, advocacy, and practical assistance for the national development of Indigenous performing arts. Now, this is a Canadian organization. I'm in Canada. But I bet you if you did a bit of homework, you would find something similar in your part of the world. So I really encourage you to be mindful of that and see if perhaps there's something in your region that resonates. I'm a white cis woman in my early 50s. I have a medium sporty build and I have blonde shoulder length hair. Today I'm wearing a black V-neck t-shirt. And joining me today, now's the good part, is Ryan Saab, Senior Vice President, Casting and Talent Development for all live entertainment experiences within the RWS Global portfolio. Prior to joining RWS, Ryan served as head of casting for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines and has a very lengthy portfolio of work, a big body of work, serving as consultant, producer, and casting strategist for renowned brands like NBC's The Voice, Cirque du Soleil, Universal Studios in Japan and Hollywood, SeaWorld, Six Flags, MTV, America's Best Dance Crew, Radio City Music Spectacular, Fox's The Glee Project, and more. So there's a lot of credentials here. And before I pass the torch officially to Ryan to continue telling all of us about himself, I would really encourage you to do some homework of your own and hop on LinkedIn, hop onto the RWS website, and get everything you need to know because the portfolio of work is very deep. And I'd rather jump right into cool conversation with Ryan himself. Thank you for being here, Ryan.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan Saab, he, him. I am super excited to be here and appreciating every single one of you for joining us on this call and excited to have a chat.
Amazing. So the way this goes, folks, is that for this first up until about the halfway mark, 12:30 or so, I'm going to provoke some questions in Ryan and start to navigate the conversation with the big focus of unveiling and demystifying the casting process. It may lean into other kinds of conversations as well, because Ryan does more than the specific casting. There's a lot of development and strategic everything that I'm going to ask him to describe in his own work that we're going to lean into. With that said, when we get to about the 12:30 mark, I'm going to invite you to come off mute and to use that little button that lets you raise the hand so that you can ask questions, because the goal is to really get inside what you need to know. And we're going to allow as much time for that as possible. So, Ryan, can you let us know, how is it that you ended up in this world of entertainment casting?
I can, and that is a loaded question, probably for anybody that's fallen into casting, because it's not something that you see predominantly in university programs or that type of thing. There's no real program for certification or degrees in casting. So a lot of times it's an organic process, an organic sort of road. And you do obviously need to have a huge interest in, talent development and curation of talent and support of productions and shows globally. So I fell into this 20 years ago. I started a performer resource website in New York City called Stage Door Access, and it posted tons of online audition listings, mainly in the US and Canada. US 90% was serving that US market. And from there, it expanded into brands and organizations contacting me to help create digital strategies around their casting and recruitment efforts. And that was my first real taste into understanding what this world was about. I was a performer before that, singer dancer, and I remember always being terrified of auditions. I thought they were exciting, and the people behind the table were at that time like gods, untouchable. Like I didn't know how to interact with them, and it was super scary. And I think, fast forwarding 20 plus years now, I'm realizing, and I realized it a decade ago, that the people behind the table are rooting for the people in front of the table. And I know we all hear that a lot, but it is so genuinely the truth that we want the best room and environment to bring out the best in the performers we're looking at. So it was interesting to slowly figure that out as I started as a digital strategist. It never really brought me into the room. It was mostly just strategy around how finding new pools of talent. This is how I first started. And it was all back in the day when everything was sort of advertising, splashed advertised on websites everywhere to get the word out about auditions. So that was my first little taste. And from there, and that grew quite immensely. It was awesome. We were doing, I was handling a huge US strategy or global strategy for Universal Studios Japan. That was the first one that was big. And we did a few things with very little limited stuff for some of the shows that were coming through New York, the Michael Jackson show, I think it was, and, diving in there. And then I was working with a lot of the MTV products, the first season of The Voice, America's Best Dance Crew, So You Think. And it was all about the digital strategy on getting into partnerships and finding deeper ways to find talent. And I realized that was also sort of in those days, the early part of going beyond just doing an audition, but actually trying to be strategic and outreach. Because there's many ways you can find talent. Scouting is one, but auditions are the main. So how do we do that differently? And that's sort of where I got brought in and was thrown into it, really. Because I had this website with a very large database of performers, and we needed to figure out how to leverage that. So that was a really cool introduction to understand sort of what that world was. From there, should I keep going?
Yes, please.
From there, it slowly, organically moved into Stage Door continued to balloon in the city, and we started doing audition technique seminars in the city for over 3,000 professional artists that were in the city at the time. And what we did is we would hire and retain, by the end of what we were doing, pretty much every creative team, including managers, agents, producers, choreographers, music directors, creative directors in New York, then Las Vegas, then LA. And it kind of ballooned into getting this huge database of professional level talent and creative teams, all really thriving in an environment of connection and audition technique and how to succeed in your audition process. So I slowly went from like audition strategy on how to find them, then somehow created this bucket of talent where we had them, which was awesome. And these creative teams were literally, it kind of got to the point where they were coming to us to create these audition technique seminars around an upcoming audition that they had, so they could kind of select people prior to auditions happening. It was a really cool, amazing time that happened there. It was all a big whirlwind. But because we created this big talent base of performers, really, or artists, we started getting contacted by corporations to do corporate entertainment. So we were then now producing actual entertainment. So it was this sort of organic path that just kept kind of stacking on each other. It came out of nowhere. Before all of this, I was working at a online weight loss company. And at the very beginning, it was an online company. We were a tech company. And I remember being a performer at the time going, there aren't really good audition websites out there for them. I'm going to create one. And I followed that path, and that's when it started, sort of the audition technique or the audition listing website, to the digital strategy, to then creating these workshops and seminars, to then going into corporate entertainment, to then having to cast those corporate entertainment gigs with the creative teams. And that was my first real introduction into what happens behind the table. And I loved it. I loved it because my foundation up until that point was education-based and support. So was able to pull that into a room in an audition environment, which is sometimes intimidating and not always fully supportive. And I continue to do that up until this today, or to this day, where it's just very much about a supportive environment. So anyways, did corporate entertainment, cast those, and then was approached by Royal Caribbean to produce some shows. And I produced a couple shows for some new build projects that were going out, super fun. My first time in that role, really overseeing a very large budget and very large cast and all of that. And it was amazing and such a beautiful experience. And from there, they made it impossible for me to not take a role that they had created, which was head of casting. That didn't exist prior to me taking it. And I was very much involved with Stage Door, which was the company doing all these events and corporate, and I said no to Royal Caribbean 3 times, and they made sure that it was, we're going to not let you say no. And I said, you know what, I'm going to follow. I need to not say no. So was there 5 years head of casting for their entire global fleets. There's over 135 production shows that are managed within that portfolio. I was then brought in to the executive producing team at Royal, where we maintained all existing work as well as new build projects. So it was really cool to see. It wasn't just stuck in casting, it was very ops driven as well. So it exposed me to a whole brand new sort of array of larger entertainment operations. So did that for 5 years. It was one of the best experiences of my life. Royal Caribbean has an amazing group of people running that operation. And, I miss them every day. They're a fantastic group of people, but it was my time to move to the next sort of opportunity. And that's where RWS came in. And RWS has a global portfolio of immense shows. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So they have a land portfolio, which serves resorts, over 60 amusement parks, many corporate events. So a whole land-based division that is different than cruise, right? So I needed to shift how we recruit and cast for that. We service 4 cruise lines. We have the biggest fleet. We're not a cruise line at all. But if you count all the ships that we serve, we have the biggest fleet that we actually operate from an operational standpoint. And it's everything from performers to circus artists to headliner entertainers to technicians to musicians. So I had to expand and understand how to figure out how to do what I did with performers and apply that same strategy to other areas within the industry. I also oversee ARC, which is our theatrical casting office. And that has a Broadway portfolio. We do Chicago on Broadway, Lion King on Broadway. We cast the Christmas Spectacular starring the Radio City Rockettes. We have some super exciting regional projects that are coming to New York. We do over 100 commercial. We also do commercial and film casting wing of that. So over 100 commercials per year that we're casting out of that wing. So this experience is just continuing to force me to flex how we expand into casting those different areas. So, and it's been incredible too. That experience was a whole other thing. It's just, as a service provider, it's something totally unique than being in an internal operation, which is what I came from. So it's just a whole new set of skills that needed to be refined and created, and built an entirely new team because we were coming out of COVID when I went to RWS. So it's been a whirlwind. 2 years today. 2 years today I've been at RWS. Nice. Yeah. So congrats. That's a quick snapshot of all of that.
Love it. I love the range and diversity in all of this, and your own personal growth through all of that, which is really evidenced every time that sort of circle got larger or the plate got larger, and more skills to hone and tweak and juicy bits to add onto that plate. Here's my first question for you. You've talked about your origins, really a leader in the digital approach, let's say, to casting. And there is a little piece of me that still, despite everything, gets a little rash when we talk about the human as it relates to digital and everything that is technology infused, when really at the end of the day, our goal is to get awesome people awesome talent on stage performing live. So there's a bit of a disconnect in that, even though we understand that the channel is so crucially important, especially fast forward about 20 years to where we are. You've already touched on the fact that you are the artist's best supporter on the opposite side of the table, that it's important to you to create support in the audition environment. You want the room to be something that people could come in and succeed in and thrive in. How do you reconcile the behind the screen component of your work with the personal interaction and ultimate personal human manifestation of the art form on stage?
It's such a good question, and something that I think anybody in this industry, in the casting really industry, struggles with on a daily basis. I mean, look, we're on a Zoom call now. It'd be amazing if we were sitting in a room, right? Like I think we would all prefer that, to get a sense of that presence. There's nothing like it. You know, especially from a casting perspective, you want that in-person experience. The challenge with it is, and you'd probably understand this as well, is when you're in an operational volume casting environment, you have to lean into ways of finding and attracting new talent. And really the only way, not only, but a very critical way, is through digital marketing. So one of the big things that I always try to do to mitigate that is I never will allow anything that I'm attached to look stock. So stock photography, to not look real, to not use our talent, to not show and apply as much of that personal touch to something that is not personal. It will not pass sort of an approval process without it speaking to a personal experience, whether that's showing what it's like to be in a show behind the scenes, their process through the rehearsal. I try to stray away from like in your face auditions, April 20th, dancers. Like, we might do that, but what I like to do is show it in a totally different way. I'll show a dancer or a singer or a circus artist or whatever it might be that we're casting for in the environment that they're in, and then quickly kind of say, oh, and we're hiring more, type of thing. I always try to apply some type of personal effect. So that's one thing from an advertising perspective. From the onboarding process, as you know, when you're hiring literally hundreds of people, I am leaning heavily into automation from a technology standpoint, so that it relieves some of the bandwidth on our casting director and ops onboarding team's desks to be able to be that personal approach, have that face to a name, voice to a name, phone call, not all just email. And it's really hard. It's incredibly hard in a fast-paced environment. So it's something I always struggle with, but it's also, you know, technology is our best friend as well. So leaning into it in a way that is impactful and can help improve people's processes, not only on this side, but also the receiver side. You know, we're always pushing to make sure we're able to do that, but it's a struggle. I don't think it'll ever not be, but yeah.
And I would venture to say, from talking to so many artists, that they can equally feel that same struggle from the perspective of something being impersonal and not knowing if in fact there's been eyes on the demo video that you worked so hard to put together, or not feeling that same connection where they feel they can then show their very best self. I think the learning in this is that the intent is still very personal, and the goal down the path remains very much about the human behind the artist, but there are some necessary steps to work efficiently, to be able to keep up with the volume, as you mentioned. And I want to dive into that a little bit more as well. So the idea being, if you are applying into a database, or if you are creating an online profile, whether it's on CircusTalk or any number of destinations related to specific companies, you really just lean into it, like Ryan's saying, and create your artist profile with the very best stuff that you've got, knowing that there are real humans on the other side who want you to be awesome and who want to be able to take you the distance into what ultimately might become a job. So let's switch gears ever so briefly. And I know that within that very broad RWS portfolio, you are talking talent in a very generalized way. And that was one of the reasons it was exciting to have you be on with us as a guest, because yes, you're diving into circus arts, And we know that circus arts is inherently interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. There's so much cross-pollination happening these days. What else? Like, how do you distinguish the processes attached to finding great circus talent from something different in the world of, say, music or singing or any other sort of performance discipline?
That's a really good question, actually. And we're diving into a strategy on how to better, integrate our practices into finding more in-person circus artists. So right now, what we're doing mostly in full transparency is off of reels. So if we're honing in on just that talent, that discipline, it's mostly off of reels. So it's incredibly important for us to see good reels and all of the different, depending on where you fall within the circus arts world, like all of the different abilities that one would have. So we do it off of reels. We were just chatting before we came on, Stacy, and that's why I was interested in what we were talking about, because in 2024, we're identifying, again, deeper ways to integrate into having a presence there in an in-person way, not in a digital format. So that's probably the only pocket in our portfolio where we rely heavily on digital submissions, because we haven't found the right partnerships, events, and it could be just a lack of knowledge on this side of not knowing what's out there. So I'm hungry to find amazing circus artists and find those partnerships and where we need to be to get those. It's actually, funny enough, a 2024 initiative for us. So you'll see us out there a lot more in person, I think, in the coming year. And that's why I'm excited to actually be here as well. It's something we're passionate about on our side because it's only growing. There's a lot of stuff happening at the moment where we're seeing that the pattern of demand in that area is not going to end. It's just expanding. So, which is really cool. So we need to figure out how to do better and find really deep pools in a more direct way, personal way.
2 questions as a leapfrog from all of that. What does good mean to you when you talk about a good reel? What are you looking for? What do you need? Let's get into the details, the nuts and bolts of what that means for you as the viewer. And then the part 2 of that is, what can the artist do? What can that circus artist do to support you in this clearly important 2024 objective? What do you need for them in the business of being an artist? It's a bit of a two-way street. There's a responsibility on the part of the artist to, in fact, furnish what it is that you need to make important decisions. What else? How do they contact you? How do they make it known that they have an interest in the kind of work that RWS produces? Those are 2 separate things. So let's start with the demo, and then maybe we can get into how do we get people talking.
Perfect. Demos for us, for all disciplines, we're hiring at about a 50% rate. So we rely heavily on demos. Demos are an important thing, and we're not the only company that, when we're talking about volume casting with the portfolio we have, a lot of companies need to rely on that. So demo reels are incredibly important. What I prefer to see and what the team is actioned to see is technique is everything. Singer, dancer, circus artist, it doesn't matter what discipline you're in. We need to see that there's a foundation of technique, including strength exercises, including whatever it might show us in that way that they're going to last 8 shows a week. We need to see that. So technique for me outweighs almost everything. Then artistry is a huge thing as well. Obviously, performance quality. I think with circus artists, their demand of integrating deeper into the shows continues to grow in the more commercial casting environment. So on cruise lines, at resorts, anywhere really where there's going to be a circus artist as part of a cast, they're going to have the requirement to be in the show, right? So that could mean that we need to also see movement / dance ability, or at least are they comfortable enough with their bodies to be able to move in a way that will not stand out in an ensemble, right? So that's an important element that we would want to see outside of sort of the discipline that they're showcasing. Is there versatility outside of that? And the biggest thing too is find moments to show personality. A lot of times there's technical elements that are thrown into a reel, which are incredibly important. There's performance qualities as well, but I recommend a very short intro to show who you are as a person is really important. I think it reads a long way, and you can tell a lot by somebody just introducing themselves. So personality is a huge thing as well, because there's not a ton of time at times to vet the way we would like to. So those would be my four biggest things that I think should be included in demo, and do not make them long. And I'll be specific, like 2 minutes is enough. Because as a casting director or casting operation, when you're looking at finding a lot of talent, you're gonna look at these and you'll be able to tell pretty quick how long you're gonna stay engaged in a video. So I would say cut all the fluff, show enough, but cut some of the fluff. If you're in a group number, maybe don't show that, because we have to try to find you, or find a way to make sure that we know exactly who you are in that moment, because it becomes, I'm being very transparent, it becomes frustrating when you're looking at videos, try to find the person, and then it switches the clip and you're like, oh, I didn't get that. So it just, you want to take, where'd you go? Where'd they go? So I think really hone in on specific moments, specific features. And if you don't have them, go to also professional footage is great, but I love studio footage. Love it. Love raw studio footage where you're in there and you're just working on things. Obviously, like, you edit it in a way that's like showcasing yourself. I love that. The team loves it. It shows you in a real component. I mean, so don't be afraid of that. Like, performance for sure, but get into a studio, show a practice, like, it doesn't show a class, like whatever it is in your world. Would love to see that. That's so focused and clear, and I love that personally. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
it's incredibly helpful. I think these are terrific nuggets. Here's an interesting bounce back. When I wear my casting director hat, I actually like to see a much longer video, because I get to fast forward and I get to control my experience of the demo. But I think the important takeaway here is, oftentimes the nature of work I might be casting for, I need to see a complete number. I really do want to see something that might be 5-6 minutes in length, because it's actually the number, and of course the artist who's performing it, who I'm looking to hire. What's important, I think, in the takeaway for our participants here and the listeners, is that you need to do your homework and understand what that company needs from you, so that you are enabling the people on the other side to do their job as well as possible, and to not land in that little category of, okay, we're trying to be nice and compassionate, but it is frustrating. It can be really irritating if what you're sending is not in alignment with what's being asked for. So it's a little reminder that there's no single way that this happens. Everything Ryan just mentioned is spot on for exactly how I build my pyramid of sort of evaluation steps. Knowing that you have the wherewithal, the foundation, the technique that will let you sustain a full-time permanent career in this, without risk of injury, or, God forbid, anything related to the intensity of this physical performance art. Pay attention, though. Some companies need little tweaks on it, and may indeed need to see a complete number. Others really want to see the very best that you've got, so that they can make their own assessment and take you to the next step in their process. So terrific information. This is like really tangible, great nugget stuff for folks to take away. Part 2 of that was around, and soon I'm going to get into questions I haven't forgotten, but I'd like to know how much crossover there is, or how much distinction there might be around these processes as it relates to the various disciplines.
It's a great question. We cross-apply the same process regardless of discipline, at least in our portfolio. And you kind of described, which, thank you for that. I totally agree with everything you said, because what I will say is, what I described was more of a pre-screening process, which is where we start, right? Like, and there's always going to be callback or requested material post video submission, always. probably never hire off of a first single submission. It just allows us to identify who we want to explore more. And based on the project, we could totally ask, show us a full number like you described, because then that's what we want to see next, right? So I think you're 100% correct. And what kind of stinks for all these artists is that they're going to have to, at times, figure out how to re-edit, get more videos. So I would recommend finding a website, an outlet where you can store all of this easily, right? And easily reference. It is incredibly important. You did one edit, throw it somewhere that you could reference it again, not in an email. Like there's ways to find sources that can help you organize that. I want to say CircusTalk does that, has profiling. So I think it's important to like find those units, because we will live on those as casting directors. They're so incredibly helpful. Organized videos, photos, we can go to one spot is super important. So to answer your question though, it depends on the client. It depends on what the need is, but it could be anything from additional material that we provide, they learn, submit, or just more generic information, or down to specific abilities. Like, can you do XYZ? Show us that, and that's how we work through callback material. So it kind of depends on project to project.
Yeah, makes sense. Excellent. All right, folks, guess what? It's time to come off mute. And unless you're in a construction zone or whatever, in which case you can toggle in and out. But I really do now invite you to come on camera. And if you'd like to find the little button at the bottom of your Zoom box to start raising your hand, we're a nice intimate group, so we can actually chat. And I want to hear some questions, and we'll bring you into the conversation with Ryan. Who's going to be the icebreaker? It's okay. I can wait it out. So can Ryan. Pregnant pause. We're good.
Hey, Stacy, Ryan, Niels here. Hello.
Hello.
Just want to say thank you for the information. I'm very grateful to know you, and everything is clear. I will fill out the form, and I will love to work with you guys.
Perfect. Yeah. And you know what, leading into that, thank you. I appreciate that. Quick plug, but the easiest way to see what's coming up, and there is a constant sort of ever-changing rotation of need, is just to go to rwsglobal.com and go to the auditions and gigs tab. Super easy, intuitive, and it's all right there. There's even a way to submit just general submissions, so we have your stuff on file. So that's the best way to sort of track the need, is just rwsglobal.com. And yes, I would love, if anything pops up there of interest, definitely please, submit, send us information, all that good stuff.
Okay. And I have to say one thing, one more. Why you are so amazing? It's because of the environment, the deep things you taught us, the digital behind the table, the education, the personal touch you want to give next year, 2024. I really like that. So
awesome.
Keep up the good work. Stacy, you also keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. That feedback is really important, actually. And I love chatting with my colleagues within casting for both the shared and differing perspectives that we hold about our processes, because I think at the core of it all is really this genuine, as Ryan said right out of the gate, genuine desire to see artists succeed and to find the right place, to find where you fit, to be able to pursue what you work so hard at professionally. And so that type of feedback is really reassuring, knowing that indeed, like Ryan, plug away. We want people to be applying. We want your team to get eyes on the folks who are showing up to these kinds of things, because they're investing in themselves and investing in their career.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Who's got a question for us? Don't be shy, because I assure you that if you have something that you're wondering about or any kind of precision, not just in this room currently, but afterwards with listeners, they probably have a variation of that same theme.
I have a question.
Awesome. Was that Lacey?
Yep.
Good. I'm going to go with Lacey, and then right after we're going to go to Kristen.
So thank you very much for this. For me personally, I do juggle. However, I'm much more interested in working in casting, and I'm very happy to have learned a little bit about RWS. However, I have a question though, because I talk to lots of artists all the time. Do you think that if an artist sends something and they don't hear back for 6 months, do you think they should re-communicate after a certain period of time? Or do you think that, as we said, we know there are folks on the other end, if you haven't heard back, it's because something hasn't come up yet, but you don't need to come back to us? Or should they? Is there a period of time that they should come back, or let it be?
I love this question, actually. And it's very subjective. I will say that. So my take on it might be different than Stacy's or somebody else's that is heavily involved in casting. But in general, I would say the first thing is to quickly answer, absolutely. Like if you haven't heard from somebody in 6 months, 100% send new material. I would say, what I was going to say is, if you're going to do a follow-up, have a reason behind it. Be strategic about it, right? So if you're going to follow up 6 months later, I wouldn't follow up to just say, hey, have you, is there anything coming, is there anything on the table at the moment, or how am I doing? I would follow up with, hey, I here's some more class footage of me over the past couple months. I feel like it's something I'd love to get in front of you, or whatever that might be. I just performed in the show. Here's a quick video of it, just checking in. I think those moments of reminding is never a bad thing, because in what I like to call volume casting, you kind of need to do that. You need to be the one proactively reaching out. Now, I say that to also couple it with, you also don't want to be the person reaching out every 2 weeks or every month. I think that becomes overwhelming, right? And that could actually turn a casting director off of you, just purely because it's like, oh my gosh, it's a red flag, right? Like, so I would say find that nice balance of respecting sort of the process, but never feeling like you cannot or should not follow up. Just follow up with purpose, follow up with a reason. And I will say this, actually, if you auditioned and you make it to the end, you're on file, you've been told, we love you, you're on file, we'll be in touch at some point, a contract's coming up, and you have a gig that you booked the following month, no problem reaching out saying, hey, just heads up. It's a good way to let them know you booked something, that you're working. It makes the casting director go, oh, wait, I feel like I should get them or whatever. But it's a nice strategic way to also be like, hey, I booked this thing. I'm not available for these 6 weeks, but October 10th, I'm ready and I'm yours. I think just do it with purpose. And I think if it's with purpose and with thought, any casting director would happily receive that.
Awesome.
Nailed it.
Thanks.
Nailed it. I'm gonna just layer on to that. It's such a crazy nuance, and I know it's hard to understand, like, what is that frequency? What does it look like? But the purpose, the Ryan used that word a few times. That is key. It has to be value add. Are you bringing something more that will actually help us do our jobs? Meaning, oh, that person is taking a contract. Good for them. It means I'm not going to consider them until the date that they've shared with me. All good. It's in the file. I'm keeping tabs. I wouldn't have known that. And then it would have been a waste of time to reach out to you when you're otherwise engaged. So if there's a value add in that communication and you're really helping the job happen, then I'm always happy to get that kind of information. I would simply add that one has to manage one's expectations. Don't make more work for me. Don't ask for something back. You need to be ready to put information forward. Trust a little bit the process, that it's being seen and noted, but it may not generate another response back. It may, like, that person may simply not have time. So there needs to be that understanding that you are sometimes putting information forward, and you need to just be ready for it to go out, land, and then be patient.
I think that's awesome.
Kristen,
thank you both.
Hit us.
Of course.
Thanks, Lacey.
Good question.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Hi, I'm Kristen. Um, I'm going to try and ask my question in a way that is going to be as broadly helpful to people as possible. And it won't be a black and white question, truly, but uh, and I'm sure other people in this group, I'm a multidisciplinary person, it makes sense. A lot of us find our way into circus because we're already kind of have a multidisciplinary bent to us. So when it comes to creating a reel, and particularly that like 1 minute highlight reel where there's a limited amount of time, and it's something that you intend to just exist like on YouTube to be found, or even to have it be like your general submission to the RWS database. You're not particularly aiming for a certain show. Um, my question is, and I don't want to frame it in like what is right or wrong or better or worse, but what would be like the difference in impressions you would get from someone who's like showing a lot of disciplines? Does it end up giving like this everything but the kitchen sink feeling? And because my fear in presenting that is like, is this gonna raise an eyebrow? Like, do you really do all these things? Because obviously, like, there's a hierarchy to the things that I'm a little more expert in versus like I dabble in it, but could do it in your show to a degree. So I hope that is a clear way to present the question in a way that could like speak to a lot of people.
Totally clear. And it's a great question, actually. It's super clear. It's actually a really good question. No one's asked it, and I think it's something that it should be addressed, and it's an important thing. So again, subjective answer, but I'm actually going to back out of it before we even talk about what you should or shouldn't submit, or how to create that reel, right? That magic reel it's something that Stacy said a bit ago, is there's research that needs to happen on the artist side whenever they're submitting for a project. So I'm going to take it out of even performing. If I'm a business executive in marketing, I'm going to search and look for jobs that have that sort of specific skill set and kind of form a submission, a resume, a cover letter based on that JD, right? That job description. It's not exclusive to just the business world. I think it actually needs to be more directly applied in the performing arts. Like, I don't think one reel is ever enough. And enough meaning it might not actually serve you the way you can serve yourself if you were specifically applying for a specific role. Now, that's one thing. So you can look at an audition breakdown or a need, and that's kind of easy, right? Like, you go, okay, they want these skills. I have those. Unfortunately, I got to like put it together, which is kind of bummer for a lot of artists because that's annoying. And I totally get it. It is, but it's going to serve you well. Like, if you want the job, you want to present it that way, and they're asking for submissions. That makes sense. To your question about like a general, sort of just a general submission into a company, not even RWS. I mean, my time at Royal, these other lines that we work with, there's so much multidisciplinary talent needed, and it's really cool. But you're so right. There is a threshold that can almost work against you if it's so many different things, right? So I think one way you can mitigate that is encapsulating like talent, whether it's all the aerial work that you do, and then maybe there's some other stuff that happens outside of that, and maybe that's a demo. This is a demo, and it's not just a huge mishmash of tons of things. So when you say multidisciplinary, I'm talking about showing 5, 6 different sort of very different things. Could actually go, oh, but what are they? I don't want to ask. You want the person on this side that has never talked to you, has never met you, saw your resume. You want them to know who you are. Like, who is this person? And I think there's a way to do that in a structured format by being smart about how you collect that footage in a general aspect. And it's okay to send 3 different demos with 3 sort of encapsulated, relatable disciplines. Does that answer your question? And does it make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think that's kind of where my material lives a little bit right now, where it's sort of like aerial circus singer and other stuff.
You're an area, so you're a vocalist and do all of that.
Yeah, like I come from musical theater world and rhythmic gymnastics world, so
I mean, that's so cool.
yeah,
I
it's
feel
like
like
a weird thing to present as.
so if I were you, Stacy, jump in because I'm sure you have thoughts too. If I were you, I would probably find auditions that really speak to you or like opportunities that really speak to you and then lead with that sort of lead with what they're asking for. So if they're looking for vocalists that are part of a sort of variety act show, right, that has, there's aerial stuff in there and there's certain things on the floor that you could contribute to, I would lead in with my vocals. And then I would have secondary splicing of these other things. A casting director would love that, right? As a first introduction to who you are when they're looking, they need a vocalist that's comfortable to do aerial work or be in the air. That's rare. It's hard. It's not easy to find. So like, if you see opportunities like that, you're in a position probably to have to like flavor in different types of edits and cuts without overwhelming a CD. So I would say, lead with what they're looking for and then pepper in all these other things and it'll go a super duper long way, in my opinion.
Cool. Thank you.
I 100% concur. And I think this idea of tinkering and tailoring is so important. You need to be looking at what is the need. It's that expression, of problem and solution, which I've talked to some of you about. This idea of the need, there's a call and you want to be solving that problem for the casting director or for whoever's in that hiring position. And then you get to tailor. So it's really okay that one submission might put vocals out front, or for somebody else who's multidisciplinary, who maybe isn't living in such radically different spaces, but you have very strong ground skills as well as aerial skills. What is the actual need? Which one leads? Which one complements? Which one adds value to you as a cast member that you could be a backup, or you could do cues, or you could be part of a group tableau, all the things. So yes, it's a question of going back to the homework. How can you be what they're looking for? And how do you just take all of your very best things? And here's where you need to be real. You need to be honest, and it needs to be stage worthy, professional level. No problem if you don't hit all the boxes, but you want to put the big ones out front so that they can get attached to you. I would add one last thing to that, which is the demo and the crucially important, like that is your tool, right? And Ryan's referenced it multiple times. Like this is a digital era. We're looking at video, but also your resume and even a bio can start to add layers. So if we see that there's training that you have had or some lesser degree of professional experience in a complementary discipline, that's great. I don't actually need to spend time seeing that because it's not the main that we're bringing you in for. Great to know, though, that this person could probably be trained into that pre-existing image or the vision that the director has because of past background skills.
I totally agree. And can I piggyback on that really quick? I sort of feel also, I think we're naturally speaking so much digitally because we're actually in a digital meeting at the moment, right? But our preference is in person, and we do a global audition tour. And I think it's incredibly important. So Kristen, for instance, if we're auditioning vocalists near you, I would 100% come in as a vocalist and make sure, to Stacy's just point, either a bio or your resume illustrates that you have these other skills. That isn't, so you're coming in as a singer, but you're still representing all the other multidisciplinary talents without like watering down any of them, really. So I think coming into in-person calls is always the preference. So speaking to the digital component, a lot of times that's not possible for everybody. That's why it is equally important to be able to represent yourself super effectively based on the projects that you're interested in. So you just got to kind of be smart about it. Like go in exactly to Stacy's point. It's a great point. Like you never want to give the casting director more. I mean, they're going to have more work to do, but you want to make it as easy on them as possible. And we want to make it as easy on you as possible, right? So it's just kind of like, they don't ask for all the other stuff. Maybe don't give it to them right off the bat. Like hone in on what the need is, and then you can build upon that through exploration, through resume. to Stacy's point, like, oh, whoa, cool, that type of thing. So
it's a business. It's a business to be an artist, and you need to really lean into that piece of work that requires you to dedicate time to the homework we're talking about, to the editing of your material, even down to writing a bio that really tells the story and helps us understand who you are. Because I think it circles us back actually to the very human aspect of it all. We really do want to know who you are and what you bring, and a little bit more about your personality. There's lots of different tools that can support, and it's your overall toolkit.
I'm working on a project right now. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, but you go ahead. I'm going to circle back to my comment.
I'm working on a project right now where we're presenting talent to a client and have had 90% of them turned down because they couldn't see personality on a demo. And while we can speak to them as casting directors, we've worked with them, we've cast them, they're amazing, they're great in the room. There are certain producers and creatives on this side that it becomes an impossible hurdle because they can't see past certain, they want to see a certain thing within a demo. And even when we give that feedback, it sometimes is missed. So it's a random statement in the sense that you can have your best demo and a CD behind you all the way, and there still might be challenges and hurdles beyond that that are important to consider. So speaking about who you are as a person is incredibly important. Bringing it back to Stacy's point, like finding who you are and your personality, if you could find a way to portray that through a demo, it's incredibly important. And I've recommended one way to do it is actually your demo finishes and you have 10 seconds of bloopers. I think it's hilarious. You can see how people respond. Oh my gosh, they're human. They laugh. Oh, I love their smile. Like, I know more about you, Kristen, in that laugh than I did when you were talking. And I love that. You know what I mean? So like, it's those moments that you can capture where you can creatively splice them in at the end of your big demo. And then you see the real person. That's one way I've like said, that's a way to show a casting director, like who you are. You got to be creative in showing us the person. Because I think that's really, 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 really important. Sorry, Stacy.
No, gosh, don't be sorry. So crucially important to hear this direct from the source. On the subject of the source, Ryan has been incredibly generous to put his email in the chat. And I think that's awesome. We get amazing guests who are really letting you now take that next step of networking and making sure that you can connect. That is such an important piece of this industry as well. And I say all of this with such love for y'all, but be mindful, busy schedules. So really it's not personal. It's okay to send a message and let Ryan know, for example, that you were on this call and you've gone ahead and updated your file and your material has been put forward into the RWS database. And if you're not hearing back, it's because he's got a million balls in the air and he's doing a whole lot of work, and it's not personal. It's not closing the door on you. It's really just noted. That person, I remember that person. They asked a couple of cool questions and now I get to go look at their video. It's all this cycle of like humans wanting other humans to succeed. So take advantage of the generosity of a personal email and then just be respectful about everybody's crazy busy schedules. On the subject of schedules, we're going to start to wind down. I wonder if there might be a final question in the room. This is how well you've done. You've just given out so much information. I wonder if we might then take the last minute or two and just tell us a couple exciting things that you're working on. Get us inspired.
Sure. So it's funny now, my head's like, what can I talk about? Because there's some NDAs going on.
Or maybe like, something cool from last year.
There you go. We produced, I want to say 30 new productions within our cruise portfolio for the different ships that we have. And it's a really cool process at RWS because like most companies, there's workshop processes, right? But a lot of times, we're going to talk cruise lines for a second. They don't do that. So it's like you have this new show concept, you cast it, and that first cast is essentially the workshop cast. So right now we're working through the same process of building out a ton of workshop casts for some really exciting product that's coming down the pike in a lot of our portfolios, which is really exciting. Some awesome creatives that are, I can't speak to yet, but that are this close to signing the dotted line, and that we're really excited to bring in the door to create some super cool new productions for our portfolio. On the casting, on the theatrical side of things, or our legit office, obviously Chicago on Broadway and Lion King, but Girl from the North Country is doing their national tour, which is amazing cast we just finished. And then there's a couple new productions. Keep your eyes peeled. ARC Casting, where we're going to be doing some really amazing, fun, super exciting stuff with some great talent that I'm really excited about as well. But otherwise, it's just nuts. We hire over 5,000 performers a year, 5,000. So it's an all multidisciplinary. It's nutty. So, and I have an amazing team that maybe some of you will speak to at some point, and they're fantastic, and it's nuts. Yeah.
Amazing. This is a two-way street. You want to be a working artist, a professional, new opportunities. They need you. So it's really a win-win, very reciprocal kind of arrangement here. Final question before we wrap, because I've just got something in the chat that popped in addition to a thanks. So thanks back at you. And the question is, Ryan, are you planning to come to circus festivals in Europe this year or next year?
I would love to look at what is out there, and I will commit on this call to going to at least one for sure. I would love to be able to do that. So I'm going to say yes to that. Just got to identify which one.
Love that. So that was Artem from the WOW Show Group. And I wonder, just super quick, if you want to type in the chat, if Ryan were to go to one, which one would it be? Maybe Artem has a perspective on that for you.
That'd
and if not, that's okay. No pressure. I also have a perspective on that for you.
I was going to say, anyway, feel free.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Amazing. Okay. Well, we've had an action-packed hour, and thanks to all of you who've shown up to be a part of the Pro Talk. Monte Carlo. He's given.
I'll go to Monte Carlo. Let's do it. I will be joining that one personally. Perfect. Love that. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Artem. That's great. And thanks all of you, those of you right now in the little room with us, and those of you who are listening afterwards. For those of you who don't get to see the chat, I'm just going to say this out loud because, again, Ryan has been incredibly generous. Here is the email address, but also I'm going to have Ryan repeat the website address when I'm done reciting his email. It's RSAAB, Ryan Saab, at rwsglobal.com.
And the website is rwsglobal.com.
Great. So. And there's a tab there for you to go in and make sure that you can bring new, important, relevant, up-to-date, your best stuff, get your video material in there. And of course, do the same on CircusTalk. We cross-pollinate. There's so many different ways to get yourself seen. You want to get your material out there. All right, folks. Ryan, it's been a pleasure. It's so nice to see you and chat, and we're kind of overdue. Big old thanks.